opt in. So if you're someone who really wants to take some value out of this, you might already hype yourself up a little bit and say, okay, this is an opportunity for me to work on some of these skills. So do a little self-coaching as we dive in to our session together. So we had about 45 people signed up. I know how these webinars work. Typically, we'll get a third of people joining. We're recording, just so those of you who are joining know, and I will be sending this out to you afterwards as well. And you know what? I'll even include the slides because I think they'll probably be useful reference points for you as well. So maybe just drop in the chat. Let's warm it up a little bit as we get underway. Tell us where you're joining from, just city, state. Tell us where you're joining from, and tell us also, give us a sense of what you'd like to take away out of today's session. What are you hoping to gain from today's session? So, location, maybe your organization, if you want to share that, and what you'd like to take away from today. Give it a moment to do that. Because I know it wasn't just to see me and hear me gab up a little bit. There's something you've got to have that's beyond, I want to spend 45 minutes on a webinar looking at another screen with Jason. You see me peeking around my monitor so that I can keep my head straight on with the camera and not let my chat be too distracting. Cool. Thanks, Lisa. I got that. Yep. We'll talk about probably three main pillars that create the definition of executive presence. And we're really going to focus on one of those. Sneak peek, it's communication. If you know me, it's about communication. So that's where we're going to go with that today. Got it. Thanks, Alex. Frameworks for presenting information. If we don't get to that today, Alex, prime me at the end, and I'll be sure to cover some real high level ideas for how you might frame up content. Yeah, Greg got it. Executive presence with authenticity. Hey, thanks, Anton. Anton and I, we worked quite a few hours together on the facilitation front at Ohio Health for a number of years. Good to see you, my friend. Cool. John, cool. Tips and tricks explaining technical ideas to board leadership levels. Okay, so John, just a quick story to start off here today. I just got off a call with a prospect. It was basically we were framing in what problem they had that they were hoping I could help them solve. And I noticed in the call that I was doing two things that I know were eroding my executive presence. So the first one was I was giving a lot of detail in a short amount of time. And the second thing was I was delivering it really, really fast. And it's not about the inner critic starting to sort of derail me in that conversation, but it was the opportunity for me to self monitor and notice what was happening in the moment. And that's a lot of what we're going to talk about today is how you can implement. I'm going to give you really three ways to think about increasing your executive presence through the lens of communication. Yeah. So, uh, whatever you're saying in the chat, yeah, various definitions, Patrick, Highland, uh, concrete tips and takeaways, Kyle, new techniques to improve executive communication and presence. You got it. You all are in the right place, and I'm thrilled you're here. It's great to be with you all. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Jason Daly. I've been an executive coach for almost 15 years with a distinct focus around communication, executive presence, and leadership development. And you'll hear a little bit more about me, but I'm really here to help elevate your skills, not talk about what I've done and how I've helped people. So let's just get to it. When you think about executive presence, just show of hands for those of you on video, who here has ever heard a crystal clear definition and you could recite it back about what executive presence is? Show of hands if you could recite that back and you're really clear on what the heck it means. Yeah, I didn't expect any hands to come up for what it's worth. It is such a fuzzy concept to define. And a part of the problem is that organizations don't even know how to define it. They don't have a clear point of view on it. And so the best thing I can offer you today is to take a shot at helping you identify what that might mean for you in the context that you are living and working in. So some of the statistics around this really are that in all organizations, this came from a study back in 2019, They basically did this huge survey across organizations and leaders inside organizations, and they asked, how many of you have received feedback on your executive presence? Staggeringly low, 50%. Now, that's low because the statistic is somewhere around 76% or 75% of organizations and leaders would say that having an executive presence is a promotable behavior. But that's a problem when over 50% or 50% of organizations aren't giving people feedback on what the heck that even means. Anybody else feeling frustrated already? Because I am. That's a part of why I'm bringing you all together as a group. Feels like this is a bit of an injustice for any of us who are trying to figure out, how do I show up and how am I expected to show up? It's difficult to define, and yet you are expected to have it. And for me, that's an issue. So I take a little bit of, I take a little bit of, uh, uh, liberty to say, well, let's define it. Let's go for it. You probably know this already. You could go on either side of the spectrum. We know that if people lack executive presence, they're going to struggle to progress in their career. Yet remember, it's hard to define what it is. And so even if you have the necessary experiences and qualifications, and yet someone in a talent review or a mid-year review or in an annual performance review might say, so-and-so lacks executive presence, and they still can't define what that is, makes it really hard for you to progress in your career. And so even for today, this really is my goal for each of you. If you can identify even one specific behavior to work on, this will help increase your executive presence. And the thing is when you leave here today, you'll have one very clear thing that you can work on. But let's start with some self-assessment. I don't know about you. I'm interested in people giving me feedback, but I'm not as interested in people giving me feedback if I haven't actually done a self-assessment first. So I'd love to just hear in the chat, what do you think is one thing? You have a sense of it. We all do. What's one thing that you suspect might be taking away from your executive presence, even if you don't have a clear definition on what executive presence is? Yeah, eye of the beholder, you know when you see it, Lisa. Patrick, that's so true. Yeah, okay. Greg, confidence level. What else? One thing you suspect taking away from your executive presence. Too much detail, Nicole. Thank you. You heard my story. Guilty as charged. Yeah. Somebody said it moved quickly. Yeah, Lisa, I tend to be a listener, which can come off as unsure, insecure, and uninformed. Man, I'm just gonna say, like, such an unfair assessment of someone who often might be the best listener in the room, but maybe doesn't speak up as quickly or as often as the person who sounds like they know what they're talking about. Does that resonate for anybody? You know, maybe you're picturing somebody. Yeah, Kristen, you said I'm a quiet person. Yeah. Okay. There are ways that you can work on these. A couple of them would be, when you speak, make it count. When you speak, make it count. Doesn't mean you necessarily need to speak up more. You get to choose what that looks like. But when you do, you make it count. How can you bring, maybe another one is, how can you bring your level of confidence internally inside of your own being along for the ride? Almost like not fake it till you make it, but fake it till you become it, as Amy Cuddy is pretty famous for saying. This is work that I've done, as I said, over the past 10 to 12, 13, 15 years, something like that. It's easy to say I've worked with over 5,000 clients on 3 continents in this area. And so my work today has been to distill some of the most important tools that will seem overly simplified, but immediately applicable to you for your purposes today. That's my only goal. That's my only goal out of today. Because as I've already said, if organizations can't define it, then we only have one choice. We have to define it for ourselves. And that's the first part. Second part is, perhaps we want to define it for ourselves within the context of our workplace. So why do you suppose presence matters? What's your sense? Like, why is it even worth talking about this concept? We've already covered that, for one, it's a promotable behavior, but why else would executive presence matter? We're a small enough group too. You can blurt out on the call. You won't offend or bother me or throw me off. I can promise you that. Patrick, you're leading others, you're influencing others. Yep. Inspire the team. Likability equals influence, Lisa. What else? What else you got? Let's hear from like one or two people. Don't be shy. There might be wrong answers, but I won't tell you it's a wrong answer. I'll facilitate that really well, I promise. Why does presence matter? Come on, come on, come on, come on. I got to warm you up because somebody's going to get coached a little bit later. Motivating teams together can set the tone, Lauren. Thank you. Builds customer trust. Thanks, Pavla. Good to see your name, Pavla. Sometimes it's all you have to offer, Anton. Yeah, Anton, could you, man, I'm going to pick on you because I know I can. Say more about that. I think that's a really interesting piece that I'd love to hear more.
Yeah, when I think about presence, it's something available in all of our toolkits, right? You may not have necessary solutions that folks are looking for or direct answers, but how you show up, how you conduct yourself, how you deliver the message you have to deliver. We all have that, and sometimes that's the best we can do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, really appreciate that. Who else? Anybody else want to speak? I thought I heard someone come off mute. I think of it this way, Anton, perfect for what you said. What's being said about any of us in rooms that we aren't allowed into or we're not invited into yet? Our reputation, our executive presence, how people think about us when we're not there is a huge part of how we influence. It's almost right. It's personal branding, but in an authentic way.
Can
And
I
so
jump in for a second, Jason?
Yeah, Patrick, please, for sure.
One of the things that I found in the last 3 to 5 months of talking to some executives here is really disquieting about this entire concept that I would like to interject here. I think this is a good space to bring this up. And it was caused by you saying, how you're talked about in rooms you're not in. The issue here with presence is that it is completely subjective because it's so defined by the perspective of the person that considers whether you have it or not. It's through their lens, but it's also influenced by how they reference the work that you do in rooms you're not in. Okay. I was told by a no longer here executive, not one that you know, and you know who I'm talking about, that 3 different projects that I had a major hand in the last 15 months never got above that particular executive. So clearly my work is not being, and my leadership is not being referenced in a room I'm not in. Okay. So how can my executive presence be grown in that kind of walled off environment? Like I just find the entire concept, not that I'm here to criticize the out here at all, is it's almost an impossible Rubik's Cube to figure out that you don't have the data to make the determination about what your executive presence is, not just because of the lack of feedback, which you've already referenced, or definition, but the fact that they're in control of your brand anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. Could not agree more in any way, shape, or form. I liken it to this. Most organizations have what we call a leadership competency model. So if you're a people leader, every year, hopefully you're having mid-year reviews and most certainly annual reviews. And if you work, and I want to be careful how I say this, some of the best leaders I know are people who they spend their bi-weekly or bi-monthly, every other week touch bases with their one-on-ones. And a part of that are conversations around their growth and development. And so it'd be like having a talent review or a performance review every year without a competency model to measure someone's performance or how they show up against. And so, Patrick, that's just one big way of me saying amen. Totally agree. And yet what I hope even today is that we could distill it down to at least one area that you can put some focus and rigor your own self into practice to see what that might garner in terms of different results. And that's hard, especially inside of any large organization and any organization that has any level of subjectivity or politics or, uh, a place where you have to play the game. Not that I'm asking for a show of hands. I'm just going to look at faces as I say this. Is there any truth to anything that's resonating for what Patrick's saying? And you're like, yep, I feel some of that inside of my own organization. Just looking. Okay. Yeah. Like very slow, subtle head nods. I know we are recording. I get it. I think I worked for a very healthy, incredible organization and it still existed. It absolutely existed, you know? Yeah. Let's build off of it, Patrick. I just want to see where we land with it though, and have some conversations about this. At the very least, what I would say is on a personal level, just on a personal level, presence matters because of at least these 6 things. And maybe we should say that it increases the chances of propelling your career forward. It increases the chances that your leadership behaviors are aligned to core values and the culture of the organization. And we certainly know that there are pockets of culture inside of any organization too. I lost you all on the video, so I'm just going to try to get you back. All right, I'm going to keep going and I know you'll pop back up. So these are some of the reasons why presence matters. And I would say at the end of the day, one of the questions is maybe not even a binary question like, am I, but really, to what extent am I someone that others like, trust, and follow? And it's not about being all things to all people. But again, in the ways that any of us might erode our own personal credibility, I think some of the question comes up around what can I do to increase that? Whether that's internal confidence, whether that's the way that people perceive us, the way that people experience us. And so, as we anchor into at least one version of a definition of executive presence, I think it's good to start and keep it very personal first. So, if you could think of a leader that you know who demonstrates executive presence, again, maybe you don't know how to define it, but you know it when you see it. What are some of the characteristics you would say are true about this person? You don't have to name them or anything, but let's use the chat, or if anybody wants to come off mute and share, I'd love to hear it.
Emotional intelligence.
Yeah, thank you. High EQ. What else? Smiling because I'm working to get this screen back. What else? Give me 2 more at least.
Jason, I put in the chat, someone who can remain calm in stressful situations, which might also equal EQ. And right along with that is a good listener. Like they're really paying attention to what's going on with you.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. And maybe that goes along a little bit with John, your comment. They might admit things that they don't know, or admit that they don't know certain things. Right. Straight to the point, Nicole. Clarity is kindness, I think Brene Brown says, right? There's something about being concise and being straight to it. Angela, integrity, genuine, self-aware, transparent, vulnerable, composure. Kristen, I got that. Yeah. What else? Anybody else want to say? Michelle, follow up. Yeah. Do what you say what you do.
Jason, I think somebody that can kind of effortlessly facilitate a meeting of leaders or a group of people. I think that's a characteristic for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Got it. Thanks, Chris. Anyone else? I'm willing to bet it typically everything you think of could probably fall under these 3 columns, these 3 pillars. And this is, I don't know, maybe one of the oldest ways of categorizing or even identifying and defining executive presence. There's a lot of research out there that you could look up. Center for Creative Leadership, ATD, so the Association for Talent Development. There's a lot out there. Hewlett came up with, based upon some research, really 3 main pillars. Your gravitas, so how you act; communication, so how you speak. I'm going to say what you say and how you say it. More on that in just a moment. and then your appearance, what you look like. Now, I have there's too many almost funny stories about this notion around the appearance that I just feel like in some ways that's like the classic third rail of trying to coach people on that. I'll give you an example. Over 10 years ago, I worked for a boutique consulting firm, and we coached people on everything around executive presence. And I still do some of that work, obviously. But I remember one of my colleagues commenting on one of the executives' bright orange sneakers. And her comment uh, was seemingly out of touch a little bit because I knew that the sneakers that this executive was wearing were at least $400 sneakers. He was European. And she said, I just think that your bright orange sneakers give away a lot of your executive presence. I don't know what sector he worked in, maybe tech for my Salesforce folks. But you know, what was authentic in executive presence to him was I'm expressing myself in a certain way, and it's not like I'm wearing my, you know, the tennis shoes that I wear for cutting the lawn. So the whole appearance thing, and I'd say post-pandemic and virtual and hybrid work, it's a whole different ball of wax in many respects. What I can safely say and what I can confidently speak about is this notion around how you act and how you speak. No doubt about it, especially how you speak. Here's my argument that I'd make for this. That same survey around 50% of people not getting feedback on executive presence from the Human Capital Institute, a year later, they started to break it down a bit more. And they were asking people at an executive level, how important are these skills and abilities to the way your organization defines executive presence? And you can see the ones that are shaded out. There's EQ in there, listening skills, authenticity, being inclusive, probably higher now 4 years later, I would hope at least. But at the top of that, 91% were communication skills. So for me, if I'm trying to move the needle in a short amount of time and trying to be really clear on what I'm focused on, this is what I'd focus on. And to make it as simple and straightforward for you today as I possibly can in the short amount of time that we have, there's what you say, there's how you say it. Content matters. What you say, how you strategically plan it, the ability to stay concise with it, that matters. Knowing a clear outcome for every communication that you create, that matters. And yet, a dependable message needs a dependable messenger. And you get to be the messenger. It's not a slide deck. It's not an email. It's not a voicemail. Could be. But whatever it is, it's you and your ability to connect with another human being or a group of human beings, no matter the format, no matter the modality. And the best way I can define the how, and that's really the lens I want to take it through, is around a sort of competency model for communication. How confident are you? How committed are you? How connected are you? Some of this has to do, a lot of it has to do with in the internal state for yourself, but also that external state that people get from you. So confidence, it's all about looking like you have a right to be there. Do people, when they have an experience with you, do they get that you are calm, you're comfortable, you're grounded? It's like you're in your own body and you're okay. That's how I would define very high level confidence. Commitment is energy. Does it look and sound like you care, like you give a darn? And are you using your listener to engage? You're using your energy to engage with your listeners. And then lastly, it's connected. Are you working to draw your listeners in by seeing them or acknowledging them or helping them feel like you are working to connect and engage with them on a different level? It goes back to what a lot of people are saying around, are you present? How present are you? Just thumbs up. Is that making sense? That resonate? Very simple model, but just right. It's some sort of take on a definition for this for sure that we've got to go toward. Okay. So a few considerations about this. Well, a lot of times we just, we forget this, but making an impression is not a choice. It's inevitable. People are making an impression about us no matter what. Patrick, it's a little bit to what you're saying, and they're making that impression through their own biases, their own shortcomings. I would say through their own projections about themselves as well. So bottom line is it's not a choice. It's inevitable, but that means we can work to do something about it. This is a skill that can be built and worked on, and it's really about consistency, not intensity, which is why we're not going to solve this for anybody today, but you're going to walk out of here with some takeaways that you can work on consistently over time. Sneak peek, if you want to continue doing some work on this, I'm going to share with you a couple of opportunities that you can use to build some skills around this. Thirdly, you have a range and your range is unique to you. Quick story. He's not on this call, so I'll say his first name. It's real first name. You'll never find him because he is a ghost, but Chuck. Chuck is a C-suite leader. He has been around for years and years and years. He's very respected, but he said to me about 3 years ago, all right, Jason, I know what my problem is, which is always a great start to a conversation in an executive coaching relationship. All right, Chuck, what's your problem? And he said, well, I need to be less like an asshole to my team. There, I said it. He said that verbatim. And I said to him, power of good questions in coaching. Well, Chuck, are you an asshole? And he said, nobody's laughing. Oh, there's a couple laughs over there. And he said, no, I'm not. Come to find out, Chuck had one of the biggest hearts of any leader I've ever worked with. The problem was that the moment he started to feel like he was inviting a connection with his team specifically, it felt a bit too vulnerable for him. It felt a bit like he was allowing people to see him, and it was not professional. Part of his range was building out his warmth. Others of you, you have inordinate, you just have an unlimited level of warmth and approachability. And the opportunity is for you to build out your range around being more direct with people. So we all have a range. Growth is about expanding your range. Lastly, information does not lead to transformation. You can plant it up here. You can read all the books, watch the TED Talks. You can study Amy Cuddy and Simon Sinek and all the people, and that's great. It's a great start. But there's no substitute for actually trying new behaviors and new ways of being out. Case in point, I can tell you, I can read the book and watch the videos about how to correct my slice when playing golf. There's no substitute for going out on the driving range and working on fixing that slice. Sneak peek too, or truth be told, is it's really hard to do anyway. And so the only way to really correct that is probably work with a coach who's going to say, your slice is really ugly and here's how we're going to fix it. So there's a lot of ways for us to build out our own transformation. So here are the 5 habits. Lacking self-awareness and self-management. There you go, Patrick. That's a nod to the EQ EI piece. Without this, y'all, none of these other tools matter. They really don't. Because here's the thing, you run the risk of being a competent jerk. So the ability to be a great communicator starts with being self-aware and self-managing. Secondly, so many great communicators don't become great until they know how to turn their inner critic into their inner coach. It's the ability to give yourself feedback and coaching in the moment without the criticism derailing you too much. Anybody else struggle with the inner critic? Anybody, show of hands? It might be good to confess a little bit. Yeah, I'm in that boat, by the way. My confidence in life this past year has taken a hit for a lot of different reasons. One of those starts with going through a divorce, amicably. But man, there's nothing that's like, whoa, my identity just got rocked to the core a little bit. So we all face an inner critic, and sometimes that inner critic just does not allow your inner coach to live and breathe and guide you. We aren't going to actually spend time on those first 2 because those take so much attention and intention to work on. What I want to give you is the fastest possible route to success, and it's working around numbers 3, 4, and 5. And if anyone on the call doesn't struggle or feel a challenge or an opportunity at these 3, you can feel free to jump off. That's fine. I hope you'll stay on. But some of us, we work fast and we talk fast. Many of us are inefficient when we're sharing our thoughts and ideas. We bury the lead, as we say in journalism. Or 5th, you make yourself small and give away your power, figuratively and maybe even literally. I'll give you some tools around that as well. So if you can improve one of these things, just one, and you can use all 5 as the option. If you can improve one, drop it in the chat. Which one would it be? You're going to give me some guidance on where to spend the rest of our time here together. The 12-minute power coaching. And just a question for reflection later. If you could improve that, how would it impact your work and life? Okay, I've seen a lot of number 4s, a lot of number 5s. Got it. Okay, 4s and 5s. 4s and 5s it is. All right, you've chosen your own adventure. That's the path we're going to start to travel down. So I'll go, pun intended, I'll go really fast on number 3. Okay. If you are someone who speaks too fast and you have heard the feedback and someone says, just slow down. It's terrible coaching. Just slow down. Because how do you just slow down? Just settle down. If any of you have kids, I can hear my 5-year-old who's homesick right now, melting down right now. If I went upstairs and said, Jack, just chill out, buddy. Just chill out. What do you think that's going to do for him? It's not going to help. I can tell you that. So if you talk too fast or you need to slow down, what I will say to you, the faster we tend to go, the harder your listeners have a time of keeping up with us. And so maybe it's that your mouth starts to move faster than your brain. All of this starts to erode your perception of confidence and comfort in the moment. If you're someone who gets interrupted a lot, it might be that the only way people can jump in is by interrupting you. So I'm going over this one pretty quickly because 4s and 5s got the top vote. And so using speed and pausing to keep your listeners engaged is a very solid tool. Strategies for slowing down. Think of it like this. Here's an illustration. Your listeners are following you through. It's like you're driving through traffic in a pretty fast car and your listeners are behind you. But they don't know how to get where you're going to. One of the best things you can do for them is to drive slowly enough that they can keep up with you. You're thinking of the next thought while they're actually processing the thought you just shared with them. So slowing down is one of the best things you can do to help people come along with you for the ride. Gives them space to process. It gives you a chance to pause and breathe and to actually think of what you want to say next. Anybody ever got over, sort of like over your skis talking too fast? Show of hands. Okay. Yeah. We all, everybody does, or somebody who does. Number 4. Okay. Maybe you're inefficient when sharing your thoughts and ideas. So a couple of shifts to consider is, instead of data dumping, let me give you all of the information. Think about, how can I move someone from where they are to where I ideally want them to be? I'll give you the solution for that here in just a moment. Maybe you bury the lead. You ever tried to answer a question and the answer actually came in the last 2 minutes, 2 minutes of you speaking, rather than in the first 10 seconds of you speaking, right? You don't want to bury the lead. So connected to that is maybe you think out loud and you talk in circles and you've got to land the plane, so to speak. If that's you, then your goal is to be more strategic in the way you're communicating. Before a meeting, before a conversation, when answering a question that someone asks, the WAIT acronym can be the most useful tool for you to experiment with in the next 2 weeks. Why am I talking? Somewhat connected to that is also considering, before you go into a conversation or a presentation or a learning session, is to consider, what's the desired outcome from this interaction? In other words, when I'm finished, what is it that I want my listeners to do? I'm working with an executive team right now in healthcare, and their challenge this week was trying to manage up with their board, because every time they leave a board meeting, they feel like half of them understand what they're supposed to be doing, the other half don't. And so to me, it's really clear that the desired outcome for that entire meeting and session, it's unclear. And that's a problem. Thirdly, you might start with the controlling idea first. One way to get crisp in the way you communicate is to actually force yourself to say, what is the main argument or the main idea that I want to share in this conversation or this meeting? Here's mine. For today, using at least one skill over the next 2 weeks that you choose from today will help immediately increase your executive presence. That's my controlling idea. I've built the entire slide deck around that idea. Next thing is to pause to choose your next phrase. I'm just curious, for you number 4s out there, which one of these resonates the most? And even if you didn't put number 4, which one's resonating the most? As like, that's something I can try. That's something I can practice. It's rolling in. Wait. Number 3, start with a controlling idea first. If you're in a committed relationship, before your next disagreement with your partner or your spouse or your children or whatever, is to actually think, what's the controlling idea here? Might actually cause you to delay the conversation if you don't have a clear controlling idea. Not a bad idea. Just saying. Yeah. All right, Lauren, thank you. Got it. Yeah. So there's some ways to practice that. Number 5, some of us find ourselves unintentionally giving away our power and making ourselves small. As I said to you earlier, one of the tools around this is maybe you don't speak up more, but when you do, you make it count. Some of us don't have strong voices by default. There are ways to bring more oomph to your voice, whether you're virtual or in person. Some people use upward inflections at the ends of sentences, and so we give our power away, and it sounds more like I'm asking you a question, or I'm just being deferential. Maybe you know that famous scene from Anchorman, right? I won't say more about that. Maybe you're really good at apologizing. That's one way that you might unintentionally give away your power. You don't need to apologize more often than not. Maybe your body's tight and closed off. So even the way that you're sitting or the way that you're standing, again, whether you're live or in person or virtual, this matters. And so the tool here is to use your body and voice to take up space. I know you can't see my hands, but I am using my upper body while I'm speaking with you. I'm filling the room with my voice. I guarantee you that my family upstairs can hear me, right? I'm downstairs, I'm in the basement, but I'm speaking loudly. I know the microphone's here, but I am speaking through the computer, not just to the keyboard in front of me. Did you feel that difference in my voice and how it kind of tails off? So using your upper body, using your voice, those are all ways that you can take up more space. Ground your body through your feet. So sometimes our bodies aren't really positioned to serve us in the moment to come up with confidence because we're making our bodies unintentionally small. So both feet on the floor. Try it right now if you're not grounded on the floor. Put both feet on the floor. If you're seated, put your butt all the way back in the chair and put a little pride in your chest. And just notice if that feels any different. It might not, okay? But just notice how maybe you feel more ready to communicate than if you're leaning back or if you're swiveling back and forth, or if your shoulders are collapsed around your sternum. This matters, and it matters a lot, especially when you're like live in a room with a group of people. Take up space with your upper body. I've already said this, but if you're worried about your hands and your upper body and gestures being a distraction, then put them to use and send them to somebody when you're actually making a point. All right, let me pause there because I know we're getting close to time, but let me pause there and just see which of these really resonate for you. If you were to practice one of these for the next 3 days, which one would it be? Drop that in the chat. What you got? Number 1, yeah, when you speak, make it count. Got it. The way I would just say, I could say, if I told a quick story about this, not doing this, okay? Oh, how was my weekend? And what did I do this weekend? Well, I went down to the family farm and I hunted with my dad. It was a fantastic time. My dad's sick right now, and this might very well be the last season of hunting that we get together. But we don't really like hunt. We just like to sit in the woods and sometimes have a beer or two, and we just use it as an excuse to sit and talk. By the way, it's the best way to hunt, right? In my opinion. Okay, so that's like one version. But if I actually committed to, when I speak, make it count, I might say something to that question. How was your weekend? What did you do? I went hunting with my dad. It was a fantastic time. And we saw quite a few deer. But the biggest thing was enjoying each other's presence over the course of 2 days. You feel the difference? Don't worry about the content, but do you feel the difference in how efficient I'm speaking? You feel that? That adds gravitas. That adds some presence underneath what I'm saying. And so if I were to sum it up, we already talked about the top two, and we didn't really get to them, but number 3, 4, and 5 is about using speed and pausing to keep your listeners engaged. If you were to scale your default speed of speaking from a scale of 1 to 10, and you wrote down that number, 10 being like, I'm solid in my speed and my cadence and what we call prosody, then you might think about, if you're at a 7, then how do you go to an 8? And a part of that is either through slowing down, carving out your words, or even putting some pauses in between your thoughts. Number 4, speaking more strategically, it's the why am I talking? What's the main idea here? What's the point that I actually want to make? And number 5 is exploring how you use your voice and your body to take up more space. Now, I promised to send you these slides, but I've got basically 23 different ideas that you can use, that you can write down on your notepad or on your tablet or on a post-it at the top of your screen. I would suggest choosing 1 or 2 of them at most and making this a part of what you see in your visual reminders on a day-to-day basis. Because over time, it's something that you can start chipping away and making progress at. It's 1:45 Eastern. I'm going to stay on. Like, I'm here, and I certainly want to cover some ground on adjourning and asking some questions about anybody who wants to ask anything. But before you leave the call, there's 2 things I want to share with you. The first one is I want you to write down, hey, out of everything you heard here today, we crammed a lot in 45 minutes. I can't believe how fast time flies every single time I do these. What are you sticking with today? What is resonating that you're thinking about as we finish our time here? And then the other question is, what's 1 or 2 things that you would try to experiment with going forward? Listen, gang, it sounds so easy to say, I'm just going to slow down, but it's hard to do. But that alone might be the one tool that might unlock it. Lisa, thank you for sharing that. Grounding with your feet on the ground and chunking blocks of info. That's great. If you have a trusted colleague, or if you have a great working relationship with a peer, a direct report, or even your manager, ask them, what's one behavior you could see me using to enhance or improve the way I show up in group formats or in one-on-one conversations? Do a little self-assessment and try to get some feedback from somebody who's close to you that you trust. Okay. 2 things I want to share. Thank you for this. I love that you're putting these in the chat. Write them down somewhere for yourself too. 2 things I want to share, and then go, and I'll be here for questions. If you're in Columbus, in a few weeks, I'm hosting a 2-day workshop. It's intensive. It's a boot camp. You're going to get coached a lot. Video camera. It's a lot of work, but I'm telling you, the changes that you would make around your executive presence are pretty remarkable. You can go to that landing page, anchoredleadership.com/impact. And you can join. It's a group of 10. Usually there's 5 or 6 people. We keep it small on purpose because we get after it. You'll hate me by the end of it, but you'll love me too because of the work you've put into it. You're basically just reserving your time inside of a big, what feels like a boxing ring, getting beat up a little bit, but leaving feeling like you know what you can do to communicate really effectively. If you're not local to Columbus and you want to do a group intensive, I'm actually going to offer a 4-week mastermind to communicate with more impact. It's a 4-week boot camp, December 5th, 12th, 19th, and January 2nd. Limited to 15 folks. I'll put it out to the rest of my audience, but you get first dibs here. And so if you use the code webinar, $100 off, it's a great way to use your professional development funds. It's cohort based, so you'll be giving each other feedback. It's putting these skills to practice. The final thing I'd say before I open it up for questions is none of us can afford to leave this kind of work on the back burner. Just looking around, and I know many of you, we're all too early in our careers to not keep building our executive presence. It's a necessary piece of your success in the future. Whatever I can do to support you, whether you're joining either of these opportunities or not, I'm an email away, and I'd be thrilled to help you in whatever way I can, no strings attached. Last week I was feeling